Marco Martin, and today in Radic Forensics we have a special guest. Welcome everyone, Detective Segovia.
Hello,
Your name is?
Juan Segovia.
And you work for?
I work for the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, Homicide Bureau, Cold Case Unit.
Wow, that's very specific. So we're very thankful and very lucky to have Detective Segovia here today with us because he said he does not only work for the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, but he also works for a very special unit, the Cold Case Unit, and we're gonna tell you more about it later. So stay tuned to watch our amazing interview to Detective Segovia today. So let's start with our interview with something very simple. Please tell me, how is the day in the life of a detective?
Wow, that's a big question because the only word that comes to mind is unpredictable. One of the first things you learn as a detective, especially in the Homicide Bureau, is to never plan too much ahead because you can't. You know, you have aspirations sometimes that come in early in your shift or the day, and you have all these plans ahead of you, and they can be changed literally in a second. We're basically at the beck and call of life, you know, and you can have things planned, and if God forbid there's a death or a homicide that occurs somewhere in Miami-Dade County, we have to respond immediately. You know, and so we have to drop everything we're doing and go to that scene.
So there's no calling off because you want to spend time with family.
No, in fact, one of the drawbacks or one of the negatives of you know, if there's any, is the fact that you make a lot of sacrifices as an investigator. You know, being part of a unit like the Homicide Bureau, you're gonna miss a lot of special occasions because we don't have holidays. You know, we don't have time off for Christmas or Christmas Eve or, you know, or Thanksgiving or birthdays. Life happens. You know, life doesn't take a time out or a pause for special occasions. So, you know, it could be Christmas morning and you get a murder that morning, and you're gonna spend your whole Christmas day and probably a couple days after on a scene. You know, my first year as a rookie in the bureau, my first Christmas morning at 7 in the morning, you know, we got a murder in Northside District, and I remember not having a Christmas that day. I spent the whole day out on the scene, and then get home for a day and a half, basically, and that's what that Christmas was like for me. It's something that you got to make a decision on. That's something that you got to be able to do long term. Not everybody can do this job.
I remember me waking up on Christmas Day at 12 and being like, damn, it's too early, I'm gonna keep sleeping. So I guess you cannot do that.
No, you can't.
It's very tough.
Yes.
So waking up for me sounds horrible already. That's something I admire of you. But let's say when you actually arrive at the crime scene, how does that feeling? When you first get to the crime scene, and I'm guessing there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Arriving at a crime scene, it's like opening up a box, a gift that you don't know what's got to be inside the box, you know, like a surprise. You get some information always on the way to the scene, you know, from the responding officers initially. You know, they give you some information. You take it with a grain of salt. Why do I say that? Because the information that the uniform officer gives you is whatever they learned from when they arrived, right? So it's very limited. You can't lock in too much into that information because things change very rapidly. So when you get there, you got to get to the scene with an open mind, get ready to be surprised, and get ready to just get a lot of information so that you can kind of assess what we have, you know, on the scene. You know, the little information you get on the way there, you're already trying to make a plan in your head of how you're going to attack it or how you're going to deal with it, but it's always a surprise when you get to the scene.
So I'm guessing that when you get to the crime scene, then when you arrive there's more people already in the crime scene.
Always. We're not the first to arrive. The first people to arrive are going to be the uniform officers, right? The uniform sheriffs that arrive because they're the ones that got called out to the scene. They have a lot of responsibilities when they arrive. They have to secure the scene. They have to separate witnesses. They have to try to, you know, make the scene as secure as possible and preserve evidence before they even notify us so that we respond to the scene.
Of course. So I'm guessing that in that time where they're there working, trying to separate the witness, secure everyone, I'm guessing the crime scene is contaminated at some point.
There's no such thing, or you try to keep it as sterile as possible. But life's not perfect, right?
Yeah.
And fire rescue has to respond and do their job. You know, the responding officers have to do their jobs. So they are aware of trying to maintain the integrity of the scene as much as possible, but life's not perfect. Everybody has a job to do, and you know, you do the best you can with what you have.
Of course. So let's say in those cases where preserving the evidence was not possible and some of the evidence got contaminated, let's say by fire rescue, they arrive to the crime scene. I know they're responsible for they have a very hard task, is making sure that the victim, if there is a victim, is dead, or if the person is not dead, they have to help the person.
Right.
I'm guessing in the process of that medical assistance, there's a lot compromised.
There is, fire rescue has a specific job to save lives,
Yeah.
right? So they do their job first, and they are gonna have to manipulate, they're gonna have to touch the victim, they might have to roll them over, may have to check for vital signs, they attach the leads to see if there's a heartbeat. So there is a certain level of contamination, for lack of a better term. However, we know what their jobs are, that we know what their assignments are, so we take that into account as well. That's why it's not just when we arrive on a scene and we see the position of the body, you can't take it for what it is at that moment, because there's a
course.
very big possibility that the body wasn't like that when initially it was found. That's why the responding officers are so crucial to us, because they're the first ones that arrived and actually saw the position of the body, for example. So if the responding officers tell us, listen, when I arrived, the victim was lying face down, and now the victim's lying face up, well, we know why that happened, because fire rescue responded, fire rescue
Of course.
flipped them over, check vital signs, they attach the leads, they try to perform CPR maybe, or they try to check for, other things, and we know that now. So we interview the fire rescue guys as well, and then now we have an explanation for why the body is upside down. We also look for other signs like lividity on the body. If the lividity is not consistent with the way the body was found, we now know why. It was
Yeah.
found a certain way, fire rescue moved the body, and we have an explanation for it.
That's amazing. I see that there is an entire process of people working together, and it's not only you guys, and I see that there is an entire process going on. And I'm very impressed that you guys take all those things into account.
You have to, because nothing's perfect. Things don't happen in a vacuum, right? Things don't
Yeah.
happen in a locked room that's secure. A murder takes place and somebody locks the door and they wait for the detectives to arrive. That's
Of
not the way
course.
life happens. You have.
You wish.
You have what I wish it was like that, but you have elements that you can't even account for. You have weather. I've been on scenes where somebody gets shot. There's a deceased person on the ground. There's casings from the gun, from the bullets, and all of a sudden it starts pouring rain.
Oh my
And now, not only is forensic evidence being washed away, the casings are being washed away, and it just contaminates the scene. There's nothing you can do about that. Sometimes it's wildlife. Somebody's been laying out for a while. There could be a dog, a cat, something, it's a raccoon, whatever it is, that manipulates things. Life's not perfect, so we have to account for all those things.
All right, detective. So I have here the $1 million question that we all have been wondering. Because in movies and in shows, they have pictured like you are the person who arrives at the crime scene. You look at the body, you take pictures, you collect the evidence, then you go to the lab, you do these crazy experiments in crazy technology, get the results, and then go to court, persecute the criminal, and put them in jail. Do you do all that? Because that would be crazy.
We do all that. It just doesn't happen in 30 minutes, and it doesn't happen by one person. A case from the moment that we get notified and we investigate to the moment that case gets solved, investigated, hopefully solved, and it works its way through the court system and it goes to trial, for example, it's years sometimes. An average case takes easily 5 years to go to trial. A homicide, it could be solved the first day. Let's say, for example, where there's eyewitnesses, the subject is known. It could be a domestic situation, and it could be a whodunit. If it's a whodunit, it could take months, even years. And and speaking now from experience working in the cold case unit, we're working on cases from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So it could take decades to solve a case. So there's no timetable. But what I can tell you is that nothing is done by one person. Okay, especially in the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, we have a system and a very proud bureau. We've been doing it for many, many, many years by people 100 years ago that were much better than any of us here now, much better than me, who paved the way for us. And there's a system in place that little by little has been perfected. And one of the things that we do that's very effective and it's amazing is that we work as a team. You can never do this by yourself or two people. So when we respond to scenes, we respond as a team. We don't respond as a detective or a couple of detectives. We go as a team. One assumes the role of lead investigator on it and gets the assistance of everybody else on the team, and that's how we work every case.
Okay, so you're telling me that those movies where they get a case and they solve it overnight, one person, they've been lying to us.
Yeah, I mean, there are some cases, where it's there's not much mystery to it, and it's, especially the domestic ones or where the person is known, they get wrapped up much sooner than others. But for the most part, it takes a long time.
I'm glad that you mentioned about the evidence being analyzed by forensic scientists. So do you have to work closely with this forensic scientists, or do you just send them the evidence and then wait for a response?
No, we work very closely with them. One of the first things we do on a scene is immediately the day after we collect all the evidence and we finish on the scene itself, we routinely like to meet with the lab the day right after, because it streamlines the process, right? If we collected 52 items from the scene, and some of the items, we don't know if they're involved or not, right? So if we see a cigarette a few feet away from the scene, that cigarette could be involved, it may not be involved. But there are always things that we need tested immediately, that we've identified as definitely being part of the crime. So we can prioritize those items, so the lab doesn't have to process 50-something items at once. We can tell them, listen, we impounded 50-something items, sometimes it's hundreds, but these 5 items are of most importance for us right now.
And please do this first.
And we explain to them, we give them a background of the case. It helps them test items also, and what areas of the items to test as well. So it makes the whole process much easier, and everybody's on board.
Yeah, because I'm guessing you are the person who gets more of the in live when you arrive at the crime scene, but these people who are sitting on a lab, they don't know what happened at the crime scene most of the time. They just get something and they're like, okay, analyze this for this, and I'm guessing it's hard for them what to look for, and you give them those clues. Then I'm guessing that in those cases where you mentioned you have hundreds of evidence, then analyzing all that evidence and arrive to a conclusion is going to take a very long time.
It does, it takes a very long time. Even the way we do it now, it can take a very long time. Remember, our lab doesn't just test for the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, they do the municipalities as well in Miami-Dade County.
Oh.
And not just homicides, they do robberies, sexual batteries, and every other crime that's committed. So the volume that they handle is immense.
Now, I want to jump into another topic that you guys might not know about. But Detective Segovia here is part of a very special unit that many of you don't know about, and that is the cold case unit. Could you please tell us what is the cold case unit for those who are not familiar with it?
So the cold case unit is a unit that it's only 3 of us that work in that unit, 3 detectives, and we investigate all the homicides that have not been solved, where the original investigator on the case and the people that investigated originally are no longer within the Homicide Bureau. They could be as old as 100 years old, and they could be as old, just maybe a couple years old, where everybody's left the bureau, they've retired, they moved on, and within the department, and that's what we do. We relook at the case again to see if we can solve it.
That's amazing. I'm guessing that's a very hard job, because if crimes happened 100 years ago, how could you possibly get some other evidence to solve the crime?
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because we open up a lot of these files that are very old or decades old, and obviously the technology's changed, even the terminology has changed, the way the reports were written back then, the paper, we have cases that are so old that, the papers are what we call onion paper. They used to type it back there, now we use different paper. So you gotta be very careful sometimes because it's literally like a little treasure vault, right? The photographs are different, the paper's different, so you gotta kind of be very careful with it, and you gotta reread the whole case all over again and try to put yourself there so that you can get a feel for the case itself. It's very challenging sometimes.
Then I'm guessing that all this evidence that you get when you open these packages and you have all the evidence that was collected, all the evidence that was analyzed back then, what could you possibly do with this evidence? If it was already analyzed, what can you do analyzing it again?
Right, well, we analyze it again because technology has changed, right?
Oh.
So there was a time when there was no DNA, and it wasn't that long ago, right? So
You
back then-
remember it?
Yeah, I wasn't around yet, I'm not that old, but there was a time where we used to test evidence, blood, for example, or fluids to see if it was male or female, and that's all we could tell back then. Listen, we know the offender was a male, we know the offender was a female, or there's an unknown male-female profile. Now, obviously, with the, with the developments in DNA, now we can actually break it down to the individual itself, the standard of the individual itself.
And I'm guessing it's a longer process than when you have an actual crime scene going on?
It is, and that's a part that people don't understand sometimes. They think, you work cold case, the case has already been looked at,
What can you do?
Well, what can you do? It actually takes us longer. It's easier to respond to the scene and know the case because you were one of the people that responded and investigating it than picking up a file and reading somebody else's work from years earlier.
Yeah.
Try to put yourself there, try to learn it, try to get a feel for it, and then look at the evidence and try to break it down like that. It takes a long time. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of rereading over and over because I can read a report once and it doesn't necessarily sink in the way it should. And I got to reread it again and again. And then what we do on our team, it's 3 of us. We'll reread each other's work because I might have picked up on something or I might have interpreted something one way, but the other detective looks at it with a different perspective, and he captures something different from what the detective wrote on his report. So it's a lot of rereading that we do. A lot of what most people will consider kind of boring work. I don't think they're going to be doing a lot of shows on cold case units because a lot of what we do is it's reading, and a lot of the reading I do is at home because in an office where the phone's ringing, people are knocking on your door constantly. You have to talk to people and you're doing things. It's really hard to really concentrate and focus, correct? So I do a lot of it at home, by myself or when you have quiet time. And I do a lot of it in the car, believe it or not, because if I pull up somewhere and I gotta wait for half an hour for something, I use that time, wisely to try to catch up on things. So it's a lot of reading.
Yeah, that takes up, takes us back to our question on your work schedule. You never stop, actually. You're always either working on the crime scene or reading the reports from the crime scene. Before we wrap up this episode, I want to ask you, Detective, one important question that I know has been there wondering for all our students. How did you become a detective for the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office?
That's a good question. I became a police officer in 1998. When I first became a police officer, I really wasn't sure which way I wanted to go. Working in a department like the Miami-Dade Sheriff's, it's a blessing because it's a huge department, and we have so many things that you could do within this department that you really have to kind of get on your feet, learn how to be a police officer, and see which way your interests take you, right? You can be proactive, you can do tactical, you can be on a SWAT team, you can fly helicopters, ride a horse, a motorcycle, or go into the investigative route. And within the investigative route, there's 1,000 things you can investigate, right? So once I was a patrol officer for a few years, I just became intrigued by investigations. For example, I will respond to a burglary, and then I will meet up with the detectives later on and ask them, hey, what happened with that burglary from a couple months ago? And they would tell me, oh, we caught the guy, and I would ask them how they caught him, and it just intrigued me. So I first became a detective with the General Investigations Unit in Northside District, and once I started doing those fundamental investigations, general investigations, I became more intrigued with violent crimes, and then once I started doing violent crimes, I immediately knew I wanted to go to homicide. To me, homicide was the top of investigations, and I started working towards that. And I interviewed, and I worked as hard as I could. Hopefully, I will get noticed. And I interviewed, and ultimately, I ended up going to the homicide bureau.
And thank you all of you for always coming back for another episode. And we hope this one helped you gain some awareness on the real life of a crime scene detective.
And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Bye. All right.
Don't look so angry.
I look angry?
Yes.
All right.
But you also work with the community and bringing. I do think you have an amazing job. No, it's funny. I've repeated myself like 3 times. I do think you have an amazing job because you do not only work with putting criminals in prison, but you. Oh my God!